From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Hey, this just surprised me. Did you know this was happening? This week, the Senate approved a bill, reading from the NPR website. The Senate passed a bill Tuesday that would make Juneteenth, or June 19th, commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. The bill would lead to Juneteenth becoming the 12th federal holiday. It is expected to easily pass the House, which would send it to President Joe Biden for his signature. So, I didn't know this was happening. Did you? All right, well, great. Okay, Juneteenth. A couple of thoughts. I think it's fantastic. It's, given the context in which it's being passed here, it's kind of comically inadequate. I mean, we got so much we need to be dealing with right now. I mean, some serious stuff regarding prisons and police reform. There's still been no serious discussion about reparations, which absolutely has to happen. The United States absolutely must do what other nations have done. Not only an apology, an official state apology, but reparations, a meaningful truth and reconciliation. Other nations have done it. I believe Australia has done it, right? Regarding the Aboriginal population and their treatment. Yeah, so I'm very happy. I think this is fantastic that there's a Juneteenth federal holiday, or will be. That's great. And if it does serve in any meaningful way, or even in a small way, to bring these issues to light the middle of every June, if we forget about these issues, which we tend to do on a pretty regular basis, they only come up with extraordinary headlines, a la George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And Black Lives Matter gets some attention for a few news cycles. You know, it takes some horrible story in the news. Well, okay, so if the Juneteenth federal holiday can bring a little extra attention in a positive way for real reform, okay. And on a lighter note, just the fact that it's a great party every year. Juneteenth has been a big staple here in my neighborhood of River West and the adjacent Harambee neighborhood here in Milwaukee. It's funny, over the last few years, you'll see articles around Juneteenth explaining what it is. It's only been the last few years where there seems to be any kind of awareness from the general public as to the fact that there is a Juneteenth or what it even means. You'll see articles explaining, or the headlines, this Juneteenth, what is that? That still happens. All right, okay. Well, again, if this raises awareness, great. If you need to hear this, here, let's go back to the NPR article. Juneteenth commemorates when the last enslaved African Americans learned they were free. Confederate soldiers surrendered in April 1865, but word didn't reach the last enslaved black people until June 19th. When Union soldiers brought the news of freedom to Galveston, Texas. That was also about 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, so there's the simple history of it. So, Juneteenth, that's great. That's great. But, with the makeup of the House and the Senate, which is still overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly Christian, overwhelmingly rich. It's just got, all the oppressors still dominate Congress. So the fact that they were able to do this, all right, fine. I read somewhere that, let's see, is that in the article I was reading? Let me double check here. Oh, yeah, it is here. Okay. Here, I'll read it to you. Senator Ron Johnson, oh God, this guy, Republican of Wisconsin, I'm ashamed to say, had objected in the previous Congress to a bill to celebrate Juneteenth as a federal holiday because of the cost and lack of debate, he said. Johnson noted that he has supported resolutions recognizing the significance of Juneteenth, but he was concerned the new holiday would give federal employees another day off at a cost of about $600 million per year. Oh, God forbid. And you got to remember, most federal employees are not raking it in. Most federal employees are working schmoes. That's a little reminder. Continuing. While it still seems strange that this is a Ron Johnson quote, while it still seems strange that having taxpayers provide federal employees paid time off is now required to celebrate the end of slavery, it is clear that there is no appetite in Congress to further discuss the matter. Therefore, I do not intend to object, Johnson said in a statement before Tuesday's vote. Yeah, it was passed under a unanimous consent agreement. So, as the article explains here, that expedites the process for considering legislation. It takes just one senator's objection to block such agreements, which the good Mr. Johnson has done in the past, but I guess he decided not to go for it this time. The bill is sponsored by Senator Edward Markey, Democrat, Massachusetts. Good progressive Ed Markey. We like Ed Markey around here. And had 60 co-sponsors. He tweeted Monday, "We have a long road towards racial justice in the United States, and we cannot get there without acknowledging our nation's original sin of slavery. It is long past time to make Juneteenth a federal holiday." Okay, good. All right, Ed Markey, well said. Acknowledging the fact that we have a hell of a long way to go, but we have to at least do this, at the very least, as an opening statement here. Okay, I agree with that. The vast majority of states recognize Juneteenth as a holiday or have an official observance of the day, and most states hold celebrations. Under the legislation, the federal holiday would be known as Juneteenth National Independence Day. All right. It doesn't say here in this article. I guess it'll probably be, well, I wonder when the offices will actually close. I guess probably the third Monday of June, I'm guessing, is how they'll do that, right? Because, let's see, let's do the calendar math here. The earliest third Monday would be the 15th. So it doesn't say it here, but I'm thinking it'll be the third Monday of June. That's my guess. So, yeah, okay, good news. Good news. I'm happy to see it. But once again, as Ed Markey appropriately acknowledges, we have to recognize and be totally frank and open about the original sin of this nation, that is slavery, and not only acknowledge it, but we have to, embrace is the wrong word, embrace the history at least, be honest, be truthful about not only the history, but the ramifications, the ripple effect, the echoes that sound across centuries. And we're certainly currently in a big old debate there. Well, I shouldn't use the word debate because it's not a debate. It's one side is right and one side is wrong. And the right-wingers, the conservatives, the Republicans are wrong on everything regarding race these days. There's something we have to, I feel the duty to warn about, because that very simple right-wing argument where they try to claim Dr. King as their own, and they talk about it's all about content of character and not the color of one's skin, and their desperate effort to deny the very existence of racism or white supremacy, as the very popular Tucker Carlson always puts it, in the form of a question. White supremacy? What's that? What even is that? Can you name a white supremacist? What does it even mean? They just completely reject the idea. And it was just this week that Merrick Garland made a pretty powerful speech about the existence of white supremacy and how important it is, how influential and how dangerous it is, In fact, as he labels it, the single most dangerous domestic issue we face is potential violence from right-wing white supremacists in this country, domestic terrorists. And so Merrick Garland, for his rather checkered short tenure so far in the job of Attorney General, I give him high scores for that speech anyway. Let's see what kind of teeth he can put into it. So that's good. As I've said many times on this program, when you're talking about racism, you're talking about white supremacy. And I think it's a very important distinction to make. Racism tends to put the responsibility on the victims of racism. Well, black folks and Asian folks and Latinx folks, that's your problem. And us white folks will support you as you fight this problem you have. No. Nothing's ever going to be accomplished with that mindset. No, it is white supremacy. And white there is right in the name of the problem. It is our problem. I'm a white guy. I'm speaking now for white folks. Racism is our problem. White supremacy is our disease. It's our sin. It's our crime that we have to acknowledge. And I get back to this simple argument that conservatives make. You have to sort of really put your guard up because they can be so convincing with their little simplistic arguments as they talk to their fellow white folks. Well, you're not racist, are you? Of course not. Why should you be responsible for the sins that happened hundreds of years ago? And didn't Dr. King say it's not about the color of our skin, it's about the content of our character? So they've got this really sort of sugar-coated, whitewashed, very simple, but sometimes very convincing argument that people fall for. Oh my God, the whole 1619 project and the rejection of that, and to the point where state legislators in red states across the country passing bills, passing laws forbidding the 1619 project, forbidding critical race theory, which they don't even know what it means. Again, they use their sort of simplistic interpretation. All white people are bad. They're teaching white kids to hate themselves. It's all, it's the right-wing conservative favorite tactic to redefine what they're fighting against so it's easier to knock down. It's the old straw man argument. You create your opponent's argument. You redefine it in your own terms, and then you make it very easy to knock down. That's the classic straw man. So we're in the middle of all this while the problems continue. Mass incarceration of people of color, systemic inequities in all areas, as I've mentioned, in housing, employment, the issues raised by the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in police reform, and that has stalled with a few just really small success stories along the way, generally out of the news cycle, generally out of the list of priorities. Now, we've got good people like Ed Markey. We do have some legit progressives in Congress. There's a handful of them, but they're there, and we have to support them. And we have to continue to try to get some movement on these issues. So making Juneteenth a federal holiday, that's great. I'm all for it. I think it's terrific. But you better not just feel like, oh, okay, well, we're good now. God forbid. And speaking of the progressives in Congress, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. If the right-wingers want to claim Dr. King as their own and use his content of character language to make their silly little simplistic arguments, let's always take that opportunity to remind them that Dr. King was a socialist. Because when it comes right down to it, there are two factors that we need to keep in the front of our mind. Number one, I've already mentioned. This is the white sin. This is the white crime. This is the white disease, white supremacy. And it is our responsibility. It's not this malady that black folks and other people of color suffer from, and we're going to have sympathy for them and be their ally. No, that's completely wrong. Number two, it does come down to politics. There is no way in this world we can make the corrections, advances that we need to make under laissez-faire capitalism. Racism is built right into the system. As long as private capital is allowed to rule the day, and those who control private capital allowed to make the rules, then there is no hope of eradicating white supremacy. It's baked into the system. So, yes, we should have goodwill and good feeling, and we should have good hearts. But mostly, we need lefty politics if we really want to make any headway in defeating white supremacy. Dr. King understood this. Dr. King understood this. That's why in the final years before his death, he was supporting striking workers. He was all about the rights of workers, all about eradicating poverty. And don't think the right-wingers don't understand this as well. It's why they fear it so much. They want to reduce white supremacy, and they want to reduce racism to this, just personal decisions, just good feelings in your heart and soul. For them to acknowledge the socioeconomic connections, the role of capitalism, the role of private enterprise in upholding, maintaining, and more importantly, relying on racism. If they were to acknowledge all that, well, then their argument goes out the window. They can't acknowledge it. Not out loud. And now I'm talking about the moderates, the good ones, those well-meaning neighbors of yours who happen to vote Republican, but they're nice people. I'm not right now. I'm not even talking about the open racists, the KKK, the Oath Keepers, the guys who fly Confederate flags off the back of their pickup trucks. We got plenty of those too. Now it's a small number. We keep talking about that on this program. They're small numbers. We shouldn't give them more credit than they deserve. But they're small, but they're mighty. They got plenty of firepower, and they get lots of attention. By the way, let me say here also, because it reminds me, regarding the January 6th attack and the investigations that need to happen, I'm not completely changing topic here. This is related. As you know, recently, the congressional Republicans put the kibosh on any kind of independent commission, which is absolutely necessary to investigate January 6th. We've had a couple of Senate committees, and they released their joint report, and we've talked about it here on the program. A very damning report, but woefully inadequate because of the Republicans and the limitations they put on this investigation from the very beginning. There were certain things they weren't allowed to even talk about. Well, here's where I've changed my mind. The Republicans at the time, and they're not even debating it anymore, I guess Nancy Pelosi's trying to figure out a way just for the House to do it, and I'm not really in favor of that. But anyway, the Republicans at the time insisted that the scope of the investigation be widened to include not only January 6th, but also to include Black Lives Matter and the whole summer of protests, because they always want to equate the two. To this day, they're doing it every night on Fox and every day on the right-wing radio talkers. They keep lying about the summer of protests and how Black Lives Matter and Antifa were attacking police and killing them, and and they want to lump all of that in with their January 6th investigations. Well, if you're going to investigate our white insurrectionists, then you also have to investigate Black Lives Matter and all the terrible things that they did. All right. Well, I've always opposed that for very good reason. It's a false equivalence. It's based on lies, and it's ridiculous. Study after study, and we've mentioned it several times on this program, Black Lives Matter, so-called Antifa, the whole summer of protests, peaceful. We're talking 99% peaceful. Any violence that you saw was instigated by A, the police, B, white supremacist instigators, or C, a tiny sliver of local hoods who just like to have fun and wreck things. Protesters themselves were peaceful. Here's where I've changed my mind. I think if we could go back and say, hey, Republicans, conservatives, would you vote for this commission if we included your proposal to investigate Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests along with January 6th? Because that's where I've changed my mind. I say, yes, please. Absolutely, let's widen the scope. Because any honest investigation will prove once again what I just said, what countless studies have already shown us. Okay, let's do it one more time. Go ahead, investigate Black Lives Matter, investigate Antifa, right along with January 6th and all of the right-wing domestic terrorists, the white supremacists. Sure, okay, let's have a dual investigation. Let's widen the scope, and let's see what we find out. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, when I might have had an influence. Everybody in Washington listens to the log. All right, if you're listening today, take it back. Democrats, lefties, progressives, the whole center-left coalition, take this back to the conservatives, take this back to the Republicans and say, you know what, we changed our mind. We would absolutely love for an independent commission to investigate Black Lives Matter and Antifa, because we know what they're going to find. There have been studies by major universities, by major think tanks, by major independent investigators, and they all show the same thing. That the protests around George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the Black Lives Movement, Antifa, all those protests were peaceful, period. Yeah, you can show us video. You can show us video of violence. You can show us video of burning buildings and burning cars and broken windows and places being looted. Yeah, you can show us the video, and we can show you the proof of who was guilty of the violence, who instigated the violence. Right-wing instigators, white supremacists, local troublemakers, and, most of all, cops, police themselves, instigating the violence at these protests. Yep, let's do it. Widen the scope, absolutely. I'm all for it now. I am with you, Republicans. Let's get a big-time independent commission to give us every tidbit of information we can possibly get about January 6th. And, while they're at it, about Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and the summer of 2020. See, they think they know what they'll find. They're wrong. Because this is the thing about right-wingers and their lies. They tend to believe their own lies. Now, I'm not 100% sure about that. I can't get into their heads. But I think a good number of them tend to believe their own lies. And the idea that the summer of 2020 protesters were violent is a lie. It's one of the couple of very big lies that they not only tell, but I think they believe. And if you want to investigate the protests of the summer of 2020, I'm fine with that. The truth always wins in the very end. So we'll win in the end if we have a full investigation. I'm not at all afraid of that. And white folks, yeah, Juneteenth, don't for a second take any real satisfaction in that. That would be just comically, tragically inadequate. Let's take responsibility for white supremacy. I don't even want to hear you say racist anymore or racism, because that tends to shift responsibility to the victim. Let's get more disciplined in our language, and when we talk about these issues, let's call it what it is: systemic white supremacy. Because now we tend to think, when you hear the term white supremacy, you automatically think of the Oath Keepers or the 3%ers. You think of the little hand signal, the OK sign from the hand and the little W sticking up. You think of, the white hoods. You think of the domestic terrorists. Okay, true enough, but it's time that we recognize white supremacy for what it is: a system that all of us white folks benefit from, a system that we participate in every day, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, whether we are good people or bad people. The fact is, it's the water we swim in, it's the air we breathe, and until we, white folks, recognize that and do everything in our power to dismantle the system, then we can never claim to be the good guys. We can't call ourselves allies. We can't chant the right slogans or sing the right songs or have the right good feelings in our hearts. No. We have to get down to business. We have to understand the social and political and economic forces, specifically capitalist forces, that rely on and maintain white supremacy. So happy Juneteenth, everybody. Happy Juneteenth. And my fellow white folks, let's get to work. And let's make things right. All right, there it is. That's the log. Oh, by the way, I always forget to do this. This program is available right now at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. If you're recommending to a friend or you want to hear some past episodes, go to your favorite platform and type Charles Purcell into the search window. It's just a good reminder, because if you type the log, you might not get anything. We fall under the umbrella term Charles Purcell. There are lots of other podcasts, other titles we've done over the years. So do that. Also, go to the website, charlespurcell.com. Everything is there, all the links, including to Facebook and Twitter, where you can follow or contact. And speaking of social media, while you're there, be sure to hit the share button. That makes a really big difference in our distribution. We get out to a lot more people when you hit the share button. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, here in Milwaukee, riverwestradio.com. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. Okay, there it is. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.